Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Constructor Criticism. This is episode 570. I am joined by my co-host and the man behind the episode, Mason Clark.
Hey, how are y'all doing? I'm ready to talk about this topic today. It's an interesting one.
You know, Mason, that you could be their idol. You could guide them in a lot of ways. I mean, I think this episode is golden.
Yes, I agree. It's those things, and allow me to soda pop into it.
Yeah, let's pop right into it. We're going to talk about why you're stuck.
Nailed it. Yes. What a transition. Oh, I didn't demute. Oh, it's so awkward. All right. What?
No. What was funny is Mason pitched this episode, and I was like, "When was the last time we did plateaus?"
Mm-hmm.
And it was when Michael Hinderrocker was on the podcast. Like,
and most people don't even know who that is.
Yeah, like, it was so long ago.
Yeah.
This is golden. Like when you said this, I was like, didn't we just do this? And I was like, oh my gosh, it might have been like 8 years since we did this topic. And getting stuck and feeling helpless and not knowing where to go from there is, I think, something that a lot of Magic players feel.
It's definitely something that will constantly come up in your Magic journey. Everyone goes through this, whether you're, Javier Dominguez or Mason Clark or whoever's listening, you're going to hit a spot where you're stuck on something and you have to overcome a thing, right? Whether that's results-based, whether that's mental, whether it's something else, it's going to happen. And what's so important about today is that you need to reflect on these things and try and get it, because talent without self-awareness always fizzles out in the end. So we have to look inward.
Yeah, and I think looking inward is so important. Today we're going to talk about how to find where you are stuck and identifying it as a thing. And it's funny because during the pre-show we talked about something that I just want to get out of the way here. Like, I think that you can be stuck in your results and not stuck as a Magic player, Mason. Like, I think that you can be like, I am not winning RCQs. I'm top hitting every RCQ. I feel like I'm getting better at Magic. Where am I stuck? And it's like, you're actually not stuck. You're actually like on a variance bend. And I think that podcast listener, person that you coached, Marcy, I had a conversation with at one point where she had, I think, top hit like 11 RCQs. And she's just like, I can't win one. I'm like, you're going to win one. Like, you have done the right things. Like, the right things are happening. This is, you are now on the other end. And this is something that Matt Kling says to me a lot, of like me overthinking things when I'm right, when I'm doing the right things, because I'm not getting the results I want immediately.
Yeah, results are very dangerous in Magic, just in general. Like, it is a really bad thing to use results as your like basis for, like, actually as like your foundation for something. Like, I much prefer Spencer's like, this is a completely hypothetical. Let's say Spencer's like, I really think Solitude Ephemerate should be in Zoo, and he says all these things, and then ends it with, and I've like I 5 of the last 2 leagues, right? When he's like, here are all my reasonings, I have all this thought process, I've explained and talked about it with you, these are the things going on in the metagame, and also I back it up with, some results. It's like, to me, results are the cherry on top of the ice cream sundae, right? And Spencer could say all those things to me and also 0-10 a league. And he's like, but I've also been struggling, so maybe there's something I'm missing here. What do you think? Right? And that sort of, like, as an aside here, it's like something that I think is very important. Same with, like, Spencer could be doing all the right things and failing to, top 8 the RCQ, right? Like, there is just some amount of variance that will occur even when you're doing the right stuff. Nathan Stroyer doesn't win every RCQ he plays. Abe keeps telling us he's playing against Nathan in these RCQs. Something's got to be going on,
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, like, historically when we did the episode on plateauing, which I think is on the YouTube channel, it might be hard to find, you have to think about like your results plateauing or your skill plateauing, and this is identifying what is happening. That's the goal this week.
Yeah, and this will apply to other parts in your life too. Like, you're going to find yourself plateauing just in your like other hobbies that you might engage with later on, or currently engage with your work life, with your, health and etc. and stuff like that, right? Like, is a classic weight loss thing, right? Very easy the first month or so to kind of go hard, get a lot of results, and then it's much harder to kind of go from there, right? So like this is something that's going to not only apply here to Magic, but to all aspects of your life.
So how do you find out that you're stuck? Like, how do you even recognize that this is even happening, Mason?
Yeah, so I think one thing that is awkward about, at least personally, is that when it comes to Magic, I'm very good at understanding that variance occurs. Like we kind of just talked about with like the results thing, right? Like I could just be, not succeeding, or maybe having issues in this area, or realizing something's going wrong and just be like, oh, this happens, right? Like it's just a part of Magic. But what ends up happening is that occurs for long enough, then I can sort of be like, okay, this is happening so much that it is a pattern, not like, a thing. And I need to kind of reflect on like, am I getting like very quote unquote unlucky, or is there something else going on here? Right. And that is sort of how I do it, is which is a little awkward, right? But at least I'm actually stuck in the plateau for longer. And I'm kind of like not Miranding. I'm hanging out there, and I'm sort of just waiting around, kind of like trying to get to that spot because I don't want to overcorrect, right? Sort of like what you mentioned with Matt there. And that's how I often do it. Is like I see myself doing something or being stuck in the same place and getting sort of the same result, which is kind of not what I'm wanting. And I think that, that really leads into the definition of insanity, right? Which is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. When I'm sort of stuck in some place, nothing's changing. That's how I at least see it. I don't know about you, Spencer. How do you feel about what I said?
No, I agree, and I think that like the overcorrection thing is the thing that I tend to do to myself, and I don't know, that might be like a mental health thing outside of Magic in a lot of ways, of like, self-doubt, um
Hmm.
but questioning mulligan decisions, or like I remember specifically, and we talked about it on the podcast probably multiple times, where there was a, I don't know if it was a GP or a PTQ. Basically, I was like, oh yeah, like, I really maybe should have not mulligan this seven, or what, something that happened, and Michael Hinderrocker, now Wizards employee, the Hinder father, so to speak, was like, man, I think that you're thinking way too hard about something that didn't matter. Like, you made the right decision, and now you're questioning yourself because the result didn't match, and you can't. That's not how like this game works, and that's not where plateaus happen. They don't happen in your mulligan decisions. I mean, maybe they do. Maybe you have hit a plateau in mulliganing that you need to overcome, but that's almost like a weakness, right? Like that's not like where you're stuck. Whereas I think a lot of the times, what we're looking for is like, what do other people have, or like what am I middling at, right? Like
Hmm.
where am I? Maybe I'm okay at this thing, and maybe I have a basic understanding of this thing, but like, where do I need to improve to get to my goals?
Hmm. Where am I lacking?
Yeah, and
Hmm.
I think a lot of the times, how do you even find those areas, Mason? Like, I
Hmm.
know what you and I will both say is play with other people, play with coaches. Letting other people view and question your decisions, like that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, I would say like definitely like playing with others is I would say like a cheat code, right? Especially if those people are invested in you, right? And they're like paying attention. I think VOD review, this is one of the big things about it, right? Like if you're going back and watching all your games and you're noticing like, dang, I'm keeping a lot of like 5 lands, 2 spells that doesn't do anything until turn 3 on the draw. It's like, what am I doing? You know, like no, like, obviously that's a very extreme example, but it's like, okay, what's happening here, right? Like, am I constantly seeing this thing? Also, am I constantly struggling with something that I've been working on? Right. I think that's another way to look at it, right? So like, I think it's like, oh wow, I just feel like I'm always picking the wrong deck. You know, I'm just always like on the wrong side of things, or I always have like the wrong sideboard plans. It's like, oh wow, like yeah, reflecting on that sort of thing. To use like a real life example, it's like, wow, I feel like I'm just not getting the same results from exercise when I was doing the same thing I was, 3 weeks ago, right? And it's like you are improving, right? And as you improve at something, your bar needs to kind of raise, right? Like we kind of, I think the word plateau, at least in my mind, often gets used because I imagine like a mountain you're going up, right? And you sort of hit this like flat plane part of it where you're kind of like resting at a camp, and you have to keep like going up, and it's going to take more effort to get higher and do better. Inversely, too, especially in a competitive hobby like Magic, right? Spencer, we got a lot of people listening. We got a lot of people competing in Magic. Other people are also moving up the mountain. So it's like maybe it's even a thing too where it's like you had a head start on some of your local friends and you were kind of crushing it, and you're putting in, good amount of work, or whatever, but you're maybe at a slower pace of your climb, you're at a harder spot, and the people around you are doing better. And so you have this weird perception that you're doing worse because, like the competition is rising to the occasion, right? Like people are doing things. So sometimes it's just like a perception thing as well of like, oh, it feels like it's so much worse because I haven't won every single RCQ I've played, but in reality, it's like, yeah, everyone's just doing a lot better. They're playing better Magic.
Yeah, you're not really in control of like your surroundings. And I think that, what you said at the beginning of the episode, this is where it applies, right? It's like an introspective thing. It's not
Mm-hmm.
about you versus something other than you versus did I make these decisions better? And that's why you have to separate it from the result, right? It's like, would I have made this decision better than previously? And
Mm-hmm.
I think that something that we talk about a lot on the show is like how to we talked about how to identify them, right? Like how to look inward and things like that. And we're going to do that for ourselves on the show. Let's talk about those things really quick. And I think that the best way to do that is to do it ourselves, Mason.
Mm-hmm.
So, have you identified something that you're stagnant, plateauing, or stuck in?
Yeah, I would say like the thing that I think about right now is my drive to be the one who like actually wins the event, like an RCQ type thing, is like fairly low. While like I think my drive, if I was at the win and in of like a pro tour, would be like very high, right? And I think that another way to say it is like my motivation is not quite there, and in part because of like this weird one. So behind the scenes, like we tried recording this episode once and it kind of got messed up. So I've talked about this a bit before, and in that one I kind of like really explored there with Abe on the cast for a minute. But sort of the root of it all is like I am someone who really likes to compete against somebody else who is putting their all into something. That is what I actually love. And Magic is a way to facilitate that. And I love Magic, but I don't love it as much as I love that thing. Right? Like the act of like you are trying your best, et cetera, et cetera. And while I've always told myself that if it doesn't hurt when I lose, that I'll stop playing. And it still hurts when I lose. So like I'm still playing, right? Like I lost a match, like I lost going for 4 at FNM or whatever, and I was like, dang, that sucks. And it's just the thing where it's like I still care, I still want to compete, but that's like so different to me than all the other things. When I get to like these RCQs, it's like, well, I don't even know if I can like for the last couple of RCs, it's like I don't even think I can play them with stuff going on in life. So it's like, okay, well, that kind of changes the motivation in playing the RCQ. And then you hit top 8 and you're against a friend, and it's like, are you really going to like take this from them? Right? Like, what are you gonna do? And like, maybe this person really wants to make it to the RC, right? And they really want to have their chance to play the PT. And so it's like, am I really gonna get in that way? And like a year and a half, 2 years ago, the answer would have been yes, like easily, right? I've been like, if you need to get through me to get there, it is part of the process. And there's sort of like this fierce competitiveness in me, right? And like, I wouldn't want you to like scoop to me, right? Like, if we were playing for the PT invite, I don't want you to scoop. I want you to play, right? Like, I want you to, assuming you don't have an invite. If you have an invite, please scoop. Anyway, so it's just one of those things where it's like I've lost some amount of that like fierceness, And so, I'm really wanting to kind of hone in for the next little bit and really try to like recapture that spark and just sort of be like, I'm going to all the RCQs that I can let it locally that makes sense. Don't care about the format. And I'm just going to do my best to win. And, like whatever happens, happens. Right. But like, I'm not going to scoop you just because we're in like the top 8 or whatever. Right. Like maybe we get to the finals and like you really, really want it and it looks like I can't go, then I'll concede for like, rearrange the prizes. But for now, I'm gonna like try really hard to sort of focus on that and that like competitive fierceness because that's what I really like. And when I played the Popper 2K, God, was that 3 weeks ago now? I mean, it should be about 3 weeks. It's been this weekend. I felt it again, right? Like I felt that fierceness because I knew all those people wanted to win, and like there was only those stakes on the line, right? And so getting 10th like stung, but it like felt good, right? And it felt good to like go into a place where like I don't have expertise, where I should say less. Obviously, I know Magic, but it's like I'm on my back foot. I'm having to figure out these matchups on the fly a lot more, and I liked the competitive nature of it all. So I would say that's sort of where my plateau is at, which is a very long way of saying I feel this lack of like wanting to really crush and beat people, which I think is a big part of like the competitive journey.
Yeah, it was funny listening to you talk. I thought about the number of the number of triggers I put on the stack for my opponents, and like just the reminding them of triggers, the stuff that I would not have done. I don't know, 8 years ago. For me, Mason, I've identified something recently playing with my friends and with the CCMTG Patreon testing team, and that's threat assessment. Um, I used to think I was really good at this thing where, like, you care about the things that matter and you ignore the things that don't. And as spells have gotten cheaper and interaction has gotten cheaper, I just try to use my mana more, which is fine, but I think that I'm going to say something crazy. I think that my lack of playing Legacy anymore has decreased my ability to assess whether a thing matters for like 3 or 4 turns. And I think that like as Pioneer, Modern, and Standard have gotten cheaper in their mana costs, it has made me just want to make sure that like I'm ahead all the time rather than ahead where it matters. And I think that it's a pretty big weakness, to be honest.
It sounds like a huge one, yeah. If I'm being blunt.
Like, I, you can't control the board. You can't control the things that are happening all the time, and I think that like the games that I win by a huge margin because of this. But then the games where I lose that are close, it's like I probably had a chance somewhere else.
Yeah, and obviously what I'm about to say isn't a exaggeration a bit, but it almost sounds like you're winning the games you're supposed to win incredibly hard,
Oh
right? Because it's
yeah,
kind of like if all the cards are sort of flipped over, you're like ahead, and you're being like taking this risk to make sure they never have a chance, And so, yeah, that's a really tough one.
yeah, and I think that like you know it's been blatantly obvious playing with other people, and there are other times where like that's not true. But I'm like a huge fan of pushing my advantage right now, and gaining the advantage and things like that. And thus, I think that it skews like how I view decks and how I view play patterns and how I view sideboard cards, how I view the play versus the draw. Like just being a fan of pushing your advantage. Which, to be fair, I want to be clear. I think that's good in Magic right now. Like I do think that like that it has never been better to push your advantage in the history of Magic.
Well,
However,
yeah,
uh, understanding threat assessment lets you do it better than what I'm doing.
yeah. I was gonna say, I think a thing that might be really helpful for listeners, I bet you probably know, but I'm going to pose the question to you, right? Is like when you're playing, and I think control is typically the deck that people understand this the best from. Of like when you're playing control, how does winning kind of look in your mind's eye at the end of every game? And it's not like you've answered every threat and you're at 20 life and they have no cards in hand, right? It's often like you've got something that's barely getting across the finish line, or like maybe a 2 or 3 turns prior, it looked really bad and you barely stabilize, right? And like letting things kind of be bad for a second. And I agree, when you have a lead, pushing it is huge. But some of the best ways to push it is like, yeah, I don't care about your Steam Core Scholar. I'm going to commit to fighting over this VV that's coming down or this FOMO, like fighting over the right things, quote unquote. So yeah, it's huge.
So what do you plan to do, Mason? I mean, I'll go first.
Hmm.
Because I think that like how we're going to address this, part of it is slowing down. I said this a lot on the podcast, but like, why does this asking why does this thing matter, and does this matter in the context of the game? If the game were to play out X number of turns, what does this mean? Is a question that I'm going to just be asking more. And it's going to be a conscious question. Like, it's something that I often do, but like, it will be something that I do more often before using a removal spell, before casting a counter spell, before, any interaction, before attacking, before blocking. If the game proceeds in this area, what does it look like?
Yeah, I always tell people in coaching that they should start every turn with thinking about what does winning the game from here look like, right? And like once again, it kind of goes like back to that mental image of winning a game does not have to be a perfect like KO, flawless victory. So I really like that one from you. I said it kind of briefly in passing, but I am just going to play in a bunch of RCQs. Like I'm not gonna play VV Cauldron unless I can just borrow the cards from friends. Like I, it's interesting because it's like I do want to be fiercely competitive. I'm not going to take VV Cauldron from someone else when I'm like in the back of my mind, I kind of know that I'm unlikely to be able to play these RCQs. But I'm going to do my best to play with the cards I have and have access to, and I'm going to try my best to win and beat people, and be sort of fiercely competitive again, and sort of get back some of that, like, I don't want to say brutality, but like ferocity is maybe a better word, of like I am very hungry to win. Um, I don't know. I think that's going to be kind of my plan about this. This is one that I think could theoretically be solved in a couple weekends and could be solved in a couple months. This is, I'm in for a weird one, I think.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that's how I feel about mine, right? Like, it's like mine could be solved in a day if I just buckle down, right? Like, but it's also, I think, a weakness that is like inherent in me at this point.
I think you need a paradigm shift from talking to you about this for a while.
Well,
Like your mindset has to change on it.
well, I think that's the same thing for you, right? Like, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that technically both of us tomorrow could say we're done doing this thing.
Hmm.
But that's not the reality of how improving works.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
any final thoughts about like how people could find these areas or improve in these areas? Or
I said it at the beginning, right? With that quote about how, talent without self awareness always fizzles out in the end. And I think it's a really powerful and important quote, at least to me. Whereas you have to reflect on yourself, even when things are going well, right? Just because you're winning a lot does not mean you're not plateauing or reaching one or get the beginning of getting stuck, right? Like often there are signs, and if you were to be self aware, you can maybe even make that less of a process. But really reflect inward, think about sort of what you're doing right now in Magic and where you think you're having issues, even if maybe stuck isn't the perfect word for you. And I would really, kind of ask you to write it down somewhere, whether that's on YouTube so we got better metrics, or it's in your phone or your journal, right? Like put it somewhere and reflect on it in a couple of weeks to months from now, and sort of, make sure you're trying to take actions to get better at that. And this, once again, it can apply to Magic and also apply to real life, right? Am I plateauing at my, health goals or my work goals or my school goals, right? try your best to do these sort of things and just reflect on it so often, and never be afraid to sort of look inward and ask yourself, like, where are my weaknesses? What are the less than stellar parts of me? And confronting that can be hard, but so important.
I love it. If you want to join the conversation, don't forget to do so in the Discord. But check out our sponsors first. Untapped.gg is the #1 deck tracker on Arena. You're trying to get better, trying to look at things, trying to watch replays. If you get premium, it's the best way to do it. And then use Mana Traders if you're trying to play on MTGO, if you're trying to get ready for the RC and Modern, or the 10K in Utah coming up that I'm getting ready for. Use the code CCMTG6 at checkout. And those are our two sponsors. We really appreciate them. No new patrons this week, but if you want to join the conversation, go to patreon.com/ccmtg. Become a patron of $5 or more. You get access to the Constructed Criticism Patreon Discord, where you can ask a Patreon question like Holden does. Holden asks, if I master a tier 2 deck, how well can I expect to do at the RC? Make sense?
Realistically, you could win, right? Like, obviously, Modern's the current RC, but like especially in Modern, or where like the power level of decks is so high, it is not unrealistic that winning is an outcome that could occur. Right now, in reality, you could still very easily make the Pro Tour. I would also argue for its first so that winning is making the PT for 99% of people at an RC. So when I say that, I do mean like, qualify for the PT, but like getting first place is also something that can totally happen. Look at Spotlight Indy. I think going into that, people would have said Brood Scale is a tier 2 deck and might even feel that way now, right? So it's just a position
I feel that way now.
Sure. Yeah, and it's a thing where it's like a tier 2 deck is not going to be the biggest factor in you succeeding in like a tournament. Like your fundamentals and like attacking and blocking, mulliganing, preparing for matchups, sideboarding, those are the things that are going to give you these huge 20%ers that are going to put you in a position to succeed, on the bigger stages. And if those aren't up to snuff, then your deck selection can compensate some for it, but it won't overcome it, right? Like, even if you are let's say you're very mediocre at everything we just talked about and you put the best deck, you theoretically could get a really good result. You could hit these extreme high rolls, but on average, you're going to still underperform relative to where that deck should be. And your fundamental skills matter so much more than your deck selection, up to a point, right? I do think it's important to note that like you need to make sure you're playing a deck that isn't just a worse version of another deck. So for example, let's say Boros Energy is like thought to be one of the best decks in Modern. You playing Boros mid-range and it's like technically a tier 2 deck is like not in this sort of vein, but something like, let's say, Brood Scale, which is a different type of deck. There's something really like it in like the tier 1 of Modern is okay and is attacking from a different angle than other things are. So you might even be exploiting something. So that's my answer. I don't know how you feel about this, Spencer. Anything you want to say?
Yeah, I think one of the key words in this question is if you master a tier 2 deck. And I think if you master any, I think also, Mason, you highlighted this is Modern. And I've known Modern. I don't know. I don't hate Modern, but I'm a known Modern like disgruntled player. But mastering a deck actually is a huge boon in Modern. And if you were to, I think Brood Scale is like a great example. I think that their Sewers is a great example. Like, if you master a deck, that's a pretty big deal in this format. It's and we're going to get into it in the Always Improving segment in just a minute. But like, I think that mastering a deck for Vegas and Dallas, is it Houston actually? I think it's Dallas. I think it's Houston. Houston and Vegas. Houston. Yeah, I actually think that's a big boon. I think that if you Modern is not broken right now, and so just playing a deck you love and mastering it, as long as it's a reasonable deck gamer deck, it's actually a huge boon. I think it's actually a good idea.
Yeah, I think it is also important to note, like, if you were to master the best deck as well, that would probably yield better results in a world where there's a clear best deck. I don't know if we're in a modern where there's a clear best deck. I think we have a clear most consistent deck in the form of energy, is how I phrase it. I don't know how you feel about that, Spencer.
Yeah.
But just make sure that there is a reason behind your tier 2 deck. And for what it's worth, listeners, if your reason is I own these modern cards, I like them a lot, I don't want to buy other ones, like, that's a totally fine reason. Like, I have a lot of experience on, let's say, I mean, Amulet's probably a tier 1 deck, but bear with me for the example. I have a lot of experience on Amulet. I played it for a long time. I really like it. I have all the cards, and I think it's well positioned. Then, like, great. That seems like a fine, like, reason. But if you are looking at, and let's pretend Nadu is legal for this, Nadu in front of you and Titan in front of you, and you could put an equal amount of time into both, you should probably just do the best deck thing, is my general advice, assuming all things are equal and it is a clear best deck situation. And I mentioned this a lot on the podcast because so often I think people are in that spot where there's like two things and they just kind of choose the other one because they don't want to be the person playing the like kind of annoying or broken deck. And I've heard some people even express like, oh, it's less skillful to win with the Nadia. It's not, like it's part of the tournament is deck selection. And so, Spencer and I talked about this off cast, like how often I mentioned like, play the best deck or whatever. And it's just to give that general advice, but it doesn't mean you can't succeed with, another deck, right? Like you can very easily win a tournament with not the best deck. Listen, I'm going to win this RCQ at, Night Games or whatever. I forget the name of the store right now. On Saturday playing Blue White Control.
You're trying to shout out the store down.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm dissing the store. Locals get ready. I'm bringing unplayable Blue White. I got 12 draw effects in my deck because these are the cards I got. It turns out I missed a few Esper Bounce
Consult
cards.
is actually pretty sweet. I don't know if you played with it yet, but
Consult's not the one I'm embarrassed to have in my deck.
Right.
I'll tell you that right now. It's not so, no, Consult the Star Charts is Mason's pick for Wawa Wii card of the set. Anyway, so like, it's totally doable. And once again, what matters more than deck selection, right, is you're playing. I think so often people think they are at a spot, Spencer, where they're actually really good at a lot of stuff. In reality, they've kind of done what we talked about in today's show, and they've plateaued in some area or gotten complacent is maybe another word to use, and something that happens to a lot of people. And they start not giving it their best. We talk about this so much in the podcast of playing with high intensity and giving it your all. I forgot that I didn't mention on this one because of the first recording I did, but like that was a problem I had before. I had plateaued and stuck and struggling to play my all and giving every match what it deserves. The listeners deserve my best version of myself for the podcast. My practice opponent deserves the best version of Mason. Give it everything you've got. You know what I mean? And so that's a thing that like so often happens. I'm getting super sidetracked here, but basically playing better and giving your all, focusing on those things matters way more than what deck you're playing in almost every format. Just occasionally we have Nadus and stuff like that where it's just better to play those than anything else. And that's okay. It's not the end of the world, And those are rare occurrences, even though we've kind of had I would say an unlucky string of events. So
let's move on from the question. I hope we answered it for you to always improving. I'm going to go first this week. I have been playing a lot of Zoo to get ready for the 10K, to get ready for Vegas, Mason, and I think Zoo is a great deck. I would legitimately think that Domain Zoo is very good against Boros. Like it's very well positioned in the modern metagame, and I have not changed my position on that. However, I didn't think that a lot of my time in Zoo was going to be well spent. And thus, I messaged a friend yesterday. I was like, "Hey, we're gonna play some Titan leagues. We're gonna load up some Titan decks. We're gonna learn the new version of Titan that we haven't played in 2 years." Because don't get me wrong, I've played a lot of Titans. Like I've played a lot of Amulet Titan, but I have not played it in a long time. And I was like, it was funny because there was like a whole conversation of who should pilot the first Moto League. I don't know if people know this. I'm not great at Moto. I'm not the greatest. And I was like, I don't care. I don't care if we burn tickets. Like I just want to learn the deck. Blah blah blah. And there was like a whole conversation of like, okay, but like, will we learn more about the deck if I pilot first and then you pilot, and then we play against each other? And like, there was like real conversations, like optimal ways to learn a deck and eat the veggies that is Amulet Titan. And it was really good. Like, I think we landed on good decisions. We learned a lot about the deck list. We learned a lot about the interactions. These were my first games ever with Lotus Field in my Titan deck, and it was good. It you know, it is a little exhausting to think about how much can happen in a turn with a deck like Titan, but once you start to see the lines and see the chains and things like that, it's pretty easy. And I think that people often get intimidated. And right now, I would say that it's my number one deck choice for the Game Grid 10K coming up.
Nice, it's awesome. I'm glad to hear that way. Have you thought about how to like best use your time beyond, like in the future too, with playing more of the deck? Like really get into the details?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many versions of the deck. The version that we played was the one that took first place on Saturday this week, which is very different than like the green. It's a green blue version, quote unquote, but it's mono green in the main, and it's very different than the other versions. It's like almost entirely just like attack with Titans, and then there are some combos with where you can. It never came up so far, but like you with enough mana and enough bounce and sack, you could loop Arawara and Boseiju to wipe your opponent's board every turn.
Yeah, that's a big part of the best for a bit.
Yeah. So like just knowing that stuff exists is one thing, but I would say just like trying different things. What was really funny is I was playing with Matt Kling, and he was like, I like that you selected a deck with no training wheels. And I was like, do we need training wheels? Like, I feel like we can learn this and just do it. Like, who cares? Like, who cares if we light some Moto tickets on fire if we're like learning a better version of the deck?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I've always been in that camp. I did not put Emrakul into my KCI deck. You know what I mean? So, a shout out to the real ones from back in the day. But yeah, no, I love that. I think that's a great always improving. My always improving comes from a thing that I've been trying to do recently in life when it comes to kind of all aspects. And that is this idea of like when confronted with the uncomfortable, pushing through. And so basically something that I had realized upon some like self-reflection was that there were opportunities and moments where like I could do like the optimal or right thing, but there's a chance I could like kind of mis-execute in the sense of like fumbling some small detail, and so then kind of doing a less good version of it. So a great example of this is like I'm very dyslexic, I struggle with spelling, and I might know the like kind of quote unquote fancy one word that like encapsulate everything I was trying to say, but I'm struggling to spell it. So instead of that, I'll write out what I'm saying. Right. So I can't think of a good example right now. So let's pretend the word circumference. And instead of saying circumference and like spelling that, I would instead just be like, like the total space and area, like I would just define circumference. Right. And so like to make sure that like I got across and didn't like look silly. And then the same thing in like honestly, like both my Magic gameplay and my League of Legends gameplay. And it happened after like some coaching or whatever in that game of like, you could make this kind of risky-ish play. It's totally the right play. Yeah, you could flub it or whatever, but you could always flub. Why aren't you going for it? And so and that actually happened after I realized the real life thing too. It's like, wow, it's compounding everywhere. And so recently, whenever I feel that sort of anxiety rising up of like, oh, I'm kind of potentially avoiding a thing or making sure I don't like messes up too much, I've instead just tried to like bulldoze forward and tackle the problem head on and be like, okay, this, or like I'm just trying to spell the word, and like trying to problem solve and trying to just, do it and see how it goes. And it's been really helpful and really awesome. And that's been my always improving moment.
I love that. How do you think, just because I want to ask, how do you think that will impact your communication outside of gaming?
I imagine. Well, it's interesting. I think a lot of my communication outside of gaming is not text based. So for
Sure.
them, it's like pretty similar, right? Like when I talk
Yeah.
to my parents, I might, once again, I can't think of a better word than circumference, and I get circumference is not a fancy word, but it's a word I don't know how to
That's
spell.
okay. It's
And
okay.
so it's like, it's like with them, I'm just like doing that sort of thing. And then like, for better or worse, a lot of my life is gaming, like in gaming related, right? Like this being my job and everything. So I think it would theoretically be very helpful. And I think like instilling this habit will eventually come up in some way, right? Where it's like, I'll see something or I'll be in a moment and I'll overcome that and I will handle the problem accordingly, or face something accordingly. But currently it's been good. I can tell it's been helpful here. So I assume it's gonna be helpful there, you know?
Awesome.
Yeah.
If you want to join the conversation, join the Patreon Discord by going to patreon.com/ccmg, becoming a patron of $5 or more. Or you can join the public Discord. Just use the link in the show notes for all of He's the Game Media. You can also leave a comment on YouTube that helps the show out. Mason mentioned it earlier. Let us know where you're plateauing. Hold yourself accountable in the comments, and we'll ask you about it in a couple weeks. You can also follow us on Twitter at ccmtg. That is both on Blue Sky, on Twitter, and then it's at ccmtg pod everywhere else. If you get a chance, like, comment, subscribe, review wherever you're listening. It helps the show out a ton. Mason, if people want to get a hold of you or find you, where can they do that?
You can find me on Twitter at Mason E. Clark. You can find me at twitch.tv/the Mason Clark. And you can reach out to me for coaching via that social media we just mentioned, or my email, masoneclark@gmail.com. Spencer, what about you?
You can get a hold of me at Spencer13H on Blue Sky. He's a Game on Twitter. You can find me every week on the Need to Nerd podcast. We didn't do the Concerted Clash this week because of family stuff, but it's still going. We still plan on doing it here on this exact YouTube channel. You can find Abe at More Nothings everywhere, and you can email him at morenothings@gmail.com for coaching. Thank you, everybody, so much for listening this week. Thank you so much, Mason, for this topic. I had a lot of fun. And we'll see everybody next week with another episode of Constructive Criticism.